900 faces have been staring at the Pacific Ocean for over 5 centuries. And for most of that time, nobody could explain how they got there, why they were built, or what happened to the people who stopped building them. Then, over the past year, something changed. Not the statues, the tools we use to study them. Archaeologists started feeding satellite scans, drone imagery, sediment cores, and 3-dimensional models into computers. And some of it, according to viral videos circulating right now, was run through Grok, the AI chatbot built by X AI. The claims coming out of that content are dramatic. Hidden astronomical codes, secret navigation systems, messages encoded in stone. Some of it is worth taking seriously. Most of it is not, and separating the two is exactly what this video is going to do, because the real story, the one backed by actual peer-reviewed research published in the last 12 months, is stranger and more impressive than the fabricated version, and it does not need any exaggeration to hold your attention. Let's start with who actually built these statues, because that part is not in dispute. Rapanui, the Polynesian name for what outsiders call Easter Island, sits in the southeastern Pacific Ocean, roughly 2,300 miles from the coast of Chile and well over 1,000 miles from the nearest inhabited island. It is one of the most isolated places on Earth that has ever supported a permanent human population. Polynesian voyagers reached it sometime between the 12th and 13th centuries, arriving by canoe after crossing thousands of miles of open ocean using wave patterns, star positions, and bird behavior instead of instruments. This was not a lucky accident. It was the endpoint of one of the most sophisticated maritime traditions in human history. The same tradition that populated Hawaii, the Marquesas, Tahiti, and New Zealand, across an ocean covering roughly a third of the planet's surface. Once they arrived, the settlers of Rapanui began carving. Between approximately 1250 and 1500 CE, they produced close to 900 Moai, monolithic statues carved almost entirely from compressed volcanic ash at a crater called Rangorango. The average statue stands around 13 feet tall and weighs somewhere in the range of 10 to 14 tons. The largest one ever successfully moved and erected is nearly 33 feet tall. The largest one ever attempted, which was never finished, and still sits half carved in the quarry wall, would have stood over 70 feet tall and weighed an estimated 140 to 2, completed. Roughly 280 of the nearly 900 statues were successfully transported from the quarry to ceremonial platforms around the island's coastline, called ahu. The rest remain in or near the quarry, in various stages of completion, some fully carved and simply never moved, others abandoned mid-work. For more than a century, the central mystery was not why the statues were built. Anthropologists have long agreed they represented deified ancestors, chiefs, and lineage founders, believed to channel protective power, or mana, toward the living, communities that faced them inland. The real mystery was how. How does a society with no metal tools, no wheels, and no draft animals move an object weighing as much as a loaded delivery truck across 11 miles of uneven volcanic terrain, and then stand it upright on a platform? For decades, the leading theories involved wooden sledges, log rollers, or massive teams of laborers dragging the statues flat on their backs. Rapa Nui oral tradition told a different story. It said the statues walked. That claim was treated for a long time as legend rather than engineering. Then, in October of 2025, a team led by anthropologist Carl Lipo of Binghamton University and Terry Hunt of the University of Arizona published a study in the Journal of Archaeological Science that settled the question with actual physics. The researchers analyzed nearly 1,000 Moai, paying close attention to 62 statues found abandoned along the ancient transport roads. Those road statues shared a distinct set of features that statues on ceremonial platforms did not: wide, D-shaped bases and a forward lean. The exact geometry needed to rock an upright object from side to side in a controlled walking motion. To test the idea, the team built a scaled replica weighing over 4 tons, matched to the proportions of the road statues, and moved it 100 meters using nothing but rope and 18 people in under 40 minutes. The forward tilt and curved base did exactly what the shape predicted. It let a small team rock the statue into an efficient zigzag walk, using far less labor than dragging it flat ever could. The concave, roughly 15-foot wide roads found across the island match this method perfectly. They were not built to drag statues face down. They were built to guide statues that stood upright and walked themselves into position, one calculated rock at a time. This is not speculation from an AI chatbot. It is a published, peer-reviewed result, and it overturns more than a century of assumptions in a single, elegant experiment. The second major shift in understanding came from the quarry itself. In November of 2025, Lipo and colleagues published a separate study built on a high-resolution 3-dimensional digital model of Rangorango, generated from over 11,000 drone photographs. Earlier ground-level surveys had described the quarry as a single, centrally managed worksite. The drone-based mode, L told a different story. It revealed the quarry divided into roughly 30 distinct carving zones, each with its own subtle stylistic signature, small but measurable differences in proportion, finishing technique, and design choices between statues carved just a few hundred feet apart. That pattern points to something specific. The Moai were not produced by one centralized workforce, following a single set of instructions from a ruling authority. They were carved by multiple independent kin groups or work crews, each maintaining its own version of a shared cultural tradition, contributing to a common project without top-down coordination. Lipo has described this as evidence that Rapanui society, at the height of statue production, functioned less like a rigid chiefdom issuing orders and more like a distributed network of family groups, each competing and cooperating within a shared belief system. That finding matters because it also helps explain what happened next. For most of the 20th century, the accepted story of Rapanui's decline was ecological self-destruction. The theory held that the islanders cut down every tree, including the giant palms once used for rope and canoe building, to move their statues, triggering soil erosion, crop failure, starvation, and a population collapse from an estimated 15,000 people down to a few thousand before Europeans ever arrived in 1722. This version of events became a widely cited cautionary tale about environmental overreach, referenced in books and documentaries as a warning about what happens when a civilization consumes its own resources. Genetic and archaeological research over the past 15 years has steadily chipped away at this narrative, and a study published in 2025 in the journal Communications, Earth, and Environment, led by researchers at Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, adds the clearest physical evidence yet that the ecocide story does not hold up the way it was originally told. The team, led by Redmond Stein, extracted sediment cores from two of the island's few permanent freshwater sources, the wetland at Rano Aroi and the crater lake at Rano Kau, by measuring the hydrogen isotope ratios preserved in ancient plant leaf waxes trapped. In those sediment layers, they reconstructed an uninterrupted 800-year record of rainfall on the island, the first continuous climate record of its kind for Rapa Nui. What they found was a sustained severe drought beginning around 1550 and lasting more than a century, with annual rainfall dropping by an estimated 600 to 800 millimeters, a decline sharper than anything the island has experienced in modern recorded history. This drought lines up closely with the point in the archaeological record where large-scale Ahu and Moai construction slows and eventually stops. But critically, the isotope data shows no corresponding signature of societal collapse or catastrophic population crash driven by the islanders' own actions. Instead, the record is consistent with a society adapting. Ceremonial energy and resources shifted away from monument building and toward a new ritual and political system centered on Rano Kau and the annual birdman competition, known as the Tangata Manu, in which leadership was earned through athletic contest rather than inherited bloodline tied to the old Moai tradition. The people of Rapa Nui did not vanish. They restructured their entire society around a landscape that had turned against them, and they kept living on that island in meaningful numbers for another 2 centuries, until European contact brought something the drought never did. Introduced disease, and starting in the 1860s, Peruvian slave raids that killed and abducted a large share of the surviving population. The collapse, when it finally came, was imported. It did not originate with an axe. Now to the part of this story that requires the most caution, because it's the part currently driving the most views online, and the part where fact and fabrication have become genuinely difficult to tell apart. Over the last several months, a wave of videos and articles has circulated claiming that Grok, or other general-purpose AI systems, were fed the totality of Easter Island data and independently uncovered a hidden layer of F, meaning precise astronomical alignments accurate to fractions of a degree, navigational sightlines from individual statues converging on distant Pacific islands, acoustic codes supposedly built into the red stone hats called pukao, and resonant stone roadways engineered to produce sound. Some of these ideas borrow from real, decades-old archaeoastronomy research. A handful of Ahu platforms, including Ahu Akivi and Ahu Vinapu, do show orientations that plausibly align with the equinox sunset or other solar events, and researchers such as Edmundo Edwards and William Liller documented and debated these alignments long before any AI chatbot existed. That research is real, it is published, and it remains a legitimate, ongoing area of study. What is not real, or at minimum not supported by any peer-reviewed source that currently exists, are the specific claims about sub-degree navigational precision across the entire statue network, encoded acoustic distance markers in the pukao, or a Rangorango to monument. Translation key. No archaeological journal has published measurements showing an average 0.3 degree alignment error that later degrades to 2.8 degrees across construction phases. No acoustic engineering study has confirmed that pukao placement changes a statue's resonant frequency in a way that correlates with sightline distance. These are the kinds of oddly precise, dramatic-sounding numbers that spread well on video platforms precisely because they sound rigorous, while having no traceable citation behind them. A large general-purpose AI model, when prompted to find hidden patterns in a dataset, will often generate plausible-sounding structure whether or not that structure is actually there, a tendency researchers call pattern hallucination. That is not the same as scientific discovery, and treating an AI's speculative output as equivalent to a published, peer-reviewed finding is where a lot of this content goes wrong. This does not mean artificial intelligence has no legitimate role in Easter Island research. It has a very real one, just a less cinematic one than viral videos suggest. The 2025 Quarry study used drone photogrammetry and computational modeling to build the 11,000 image digital twin that revealed the 30 carving zones. The Walking Moai study used three-dimensional modeling software to identify the precise geometric features, the E, base shape and center of gravity, that made controlled rocking possible before that hypothesis was confirmed physically with a real replica. Esri and partner researchers have built a separate GIS-based digital twin of the island, layering drone imagery over geological and archaeological survey data to let researchers study the quarry and its statues without physically disturbing a fragile, culturally significant site. These are the actual applications of computational tools to Rapanui archaeology happening right now: image classification, photogrammetry, geographic information systems, three-dimensional physics modeling, and they are producing real, citable, checkable results. They are simply less flashy than a chatbot claiming to have decoded a lost civilization's secret machine in a single afternoon. The island's writing system deserves its own honest treatment here, because it is the one area where genuine mystery still exists without needing any exaggeration. Rangorango is a script carved into wooden tablets, first documented by European missionaries in the 1860s, and it remains one, of only a small handful of writing systems in human history believed to have developed independently, without contact with any existing script. Fewer than 30 authenticated tablets survive today, scattered across museum collections worldwide, and despite more than a century of dedicated attempts by serious linguists, it has been definitively deciphered. In 2025, a researcher named Eric Kiley published a claim to have decoded all 26 known Rangorango inscriptions, proposing that the script is phonetically syllabic and records Polynesian mythology and ritual knowledge. His claim has not achieved broad acceptance in the academic linguistics community, and the history of Rangorango is littered with confident decipherment claims that did not survive scrutiny. That does not make his work worthless, but it does mean it belongs in the category of an interesting, unproven hypothesis, not a settled fact, and any honest account of Easter Island has to leave it there. So what does the real, current, evidence-based picture of Rapa Nui actually look like once you strip out the fabricated numbers and keep only what published research supports? It is a picture of a small Polynesian society that crossed one of the most extreme distances in the history of human seafaring, using nothing but observational skill, and then built, over roughly 2.5 centuries, one of the most labor-intensive monumental traditions anywhere in the Pacific, using volcanic stone, rope, and an engineering insight about center of gravity and rocking motion, sophisticated enough that it took modern researchers until 2025 to fully confirm it experimentally. It is a picture of a society organized not by a single centralized authority, but by multiple independent family or clan groups, each carving in its own zone of the same quarry, cooperating on a shared cultural project across generations. It is a picture of resilience rather than self-destruction, a community that faced a genuinely brutal century-long drought, reorganized its entire ritual and political system in response, and continued living on that island for another 200 years, only to be devastated afterward by disease and slave raids that arrived from outside, not by anything the islanders did to themselves. And it is a picture with real unresolved edge. Still left, a script no one has fully read, some statue orientations whose exact purpose is still debated among specialists, and ongoing questions about exactly how, generation after generation, the specific technical knowledge of quarrying, transport, and platform construction was passed down and eventually set aside as circumstances changed. There is also a more immediate concern attached to this story, and it has nothing to do with the ancient past. A study using advanced coastal modeling published in 2025 found that rising sea levels driven by climate change could threaten dozens of Rapa Nui's cultural sites by the year 2080, including Ahu Tongariki, the largest ceremonial platform on the island, home to 15 restored Moai standing in a row facing the interior. Researchers estimate that wave action and flooding could affect more than 50 significant archaeological locations if current trends continue. The same technology now being used to study how these statues were built, drone mapping, three-dimensional digital preservation, satellite-based coastal modeling, is also being used to document and protect them before that erosion happens. In a strange way, the tools generating both the real discoveries and the viral misinformation are the same tools that may end up preserving the physical evidence long after rising water reaches the coastline, where these platforms have stood for 500 years. What all of this adds up to is a lesson that goes beyond one island in the South Pacific. Real archaeological progress right now looks like drone photographs stitched into three-dimensional models, sediment cores, measured for isotope ratios down to fractions of a part per thousand, and a 4-ton replica statue rocked across a test field by 18 people holding rope, then written up, reviewed by other specialists, and published under a name and an institution that can be checked. It does not look like a chatbot producing a tidy cinematic revelation about lost codes and secret machines with no citation attached. Both versions of this story are being told online right now, sometimes literally side by side under nearly identical titles. Only one of them will still be true a year from now, and that is the version built on evidence you can trace back to a source. The statues have been standing on that coastline for 5 centuries, patient enough to survive drought, colonization, and disease. They can survive a few more years of us getting the story right. And the current research finally getting it right, rather than fast, is the most respectful thing modern science has done for them in a long time. Here is the expanded script with all headings removed. For over 5 centuries, 900 stone faces have gazed silently across the Pacific Ocean from the shores of Rapanui. These monumental statues, carved from volcanic rock, have witnessed countless generations pass beneath their watchful eyes. Yet, until recently, the secrets of their creation remained locked in the distant past, read by centuries of speculation, myth, and incomplete evidence. Then, in a remarkable turn of events, the tools we use to study ancient history underwent a transformation that rivals the statues themselves in significance. Archaeologists began feeding satellite imagery, drone photography, sediment samples, and three-dimensional models into sophisticated computer systems. Some of this data, according to videos, spreading rapidly across social media platforms, was processed through artificial intelligence systems. The claims emerging from these digital investigations range from the plausible to the fantastic: hidden astronomical codes, sophisticated navigates, high-end systems, and messages encoded in stone. Some of these theories deserve careful consideration, while others represent little more than digital age mythology. The challenge lies in distinguishing genuine scientific discovery from algorithmic speculation. This is precisely the task before us today, because the authentic story, supported by peer-reviewed research published within the last 12 months, is far more remarkable than any fabricated version could ever be. The story of Rapanui begins not with stone, but with wood, with ocean, and with one of the most extraordinary feats of human navigation ever accomplished. The island, known to its inhabitants as Rapanui and to outsiders as Easter Island, occupies one of the most remote locations on Earth. It sits approximately 2,300 miles from the coast of Chile and more than 1,000 miles from the nearest inhabited landmass. This isolation makes it one of the few places on the planet capable of supporting permanent human settlement while remaining so extraordinarily distant from any other population center. The Polynesian voyagers who first reached this speck of land between the 12th and 13th centuries accomplished something that defies easy comprehension. They crossed thousands of miles of open ocean in double-hulled canoes, navigating without compasses or charts, guided instead by the subtle rhythms of nature. They read the patterns of ocean, swells, the positions of stars, the behavior of birds, and the movement of clouds on the horizon. This was not a chance discovery, but the culmination of a maritime tradition that populated the Hawaiian Islands, the Marquesas, Tahiti, and New Zealand across an ocean spanning roughly 1/3 of the Earth's surface. The settlement of Rapa Nui represents the farthest reach of this remarkable expansion, a testament to human courage, intelligence, and adaptability that deserves recognition alongside any modern technological achievement. Once established on their island home, the people of Rapa Nui began a monumental project that would define their culture for generations. Between approximately 1250 and 1500 CE, they carved nearly 900 Moai, monolithic statues representing deified ancestors, chiefs, and lineage founders. These figures were believed to channel protective spiritual power, known as mana, toward the living communities that faced them inland. The statues were created almost entirely from compressed volcanic ash, quarried at a crater called Rangorango, a site that became the workshop for generations of master carvers. The average Moai stands about 13 feet tall and weighs roughly 10 to 14 tons, equivalent to a loaded delivery truck. The largest statue successfully moved and erected reached nearly 33 feet in height. In the quarry walls, visitors can still see the largest moai ever attempted, a colossal figure that would have stood over 70 feet tall and weighed between 140 and 270 tons had it been completed. Of the nearly 900 statues created, approximately 280 were transported from the quarry to ceremonial platforms called ahu along the island's coastline. The remainder still sit in or near the quarry, frozen in various stages of completion, some fully carved and abandoned, others left mid-creation. For over a century, the most persistent mystery surrounding the Moai was not why they were built, but how. How could a society without metal tools, wheels, or draft animals move objects weighing as much as a truck across miles of rough volcanic terrain and then stand them upright on platforms? Traditional theories proposed wooden sledges, log rollers, or vast teams of laborers dragging the statues horizontally across the landscape. The oral traditions of Rapanui offered a different explanation. The statues walked. Western scholars dismissed this as legend, but in October 2025, a team led by anthropologists Carl Lipo and Terry Hunt published research that revolutionized our understanding of Moai transport. The researchers analyzed nearly 1,000 statues, paying particular attention to 62 found abandoned along ancient transport roads. These roadside statues shared distinctive features: wide, D-shaped bases, and a forward lean, geometry perfectly suited for rocking an upright object from side to side in a controlled walking motion. The team built a scale replica weighing over 4 tons and moved it 100 meters using only rope and 18 people in less than 40 minutes. The forward tilt and curved base worked exactly as predicted, allowing a small team to rock the statue into an efficient zigzag walk requiring far less labor than dragging it flat. The wide, concave roads found across the island match this method precisely, designed not to drag statues face down, but to guide upright statues walking into position, one calculated movement at a time. This elegant experiment overturned more than a century of assumptions with the kind of clear, reproducible evidence that defines genuine scientific progress. The second major breakthrough came from the quarry itself. In November 2025, researchers published a study based on a high-resolution, three-dimensional digital model of Rangorango, created from more than 11,000 drone photographs. Earlier ground-level surveys had described the quarry as a single, centrally managed worksite under the control of a powerful chief. The drone-based model revealed something entirely different: approximately 30 distinct carving zones, each with subtle stylistic signatures, small but measurable differences in proportion, finishing technique, and design choices. This pattern suggests the Moai were not produced by one centralized workforce following a single set of instructions, but rather by multiple independent kin groups or work crews, each maintaining its own version of a shared cultural tradition. These groups contributed to a common project without top-down coordination, functioning less like a rigid chiefdom and more like a distributed network of family groups competing and cooperating within a shared belief system. This finding matters because it helps explain what happened next and challenges fundamental assumptions about how complex societies organize themselves. If this kind of deep, evidence-checked history is what you come here for, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one, and drop a comment below with which part of the real Rapanui research surprised you most. The walking statues, the distributed quarry workforce, or the drought record that TEE rewrites the ecocide story. Hit like if you'd rather get the sourced, fact-checked version of a story than the viral one, and share this with someone who's already seen one of those AI decoded the Moai videos, because they deserve to hear what the actual research says too.